When he stepped through those hospital doors for what should have been a simple examination, the last person he expected to see was her, the woman whose heart he shattered and never forgot. Now destiny has given him one more shot. But can she ever trust him again? The billionaire's second chance, a tale of heartbreak, healing, and hope that will leave you breathless. The distant roar of Manhattan traffic hummed softly beyond the glass walls of Montgomery Tower, a gleaming structure of chrome and determination that sliced through the city's horizon. Within its walls, Marcus Montgomery occupied his corner office, his palms pressed firmly against his desk, as the world tilted dangerously around him. He'd been navigating conference calls since sunrise, his espresso sitting cold and forgotten when the lightheadedness struck. At first, he'd dismissed it. Men like him didn't collapse, they pressed forward. But when his executive assistant discovered him leaning heavily against the boardroom wall, ashen and unsteady, even Marcus had to acknowledge that something wasn't right. Now, several hours later, he found himself standing in the reception area of the Manhattan Cardiology Institute, his jacket draped over one arm, his jaw clenched tight. He despised medical facilities. The sharp scent of disinfectant and the persistent electronic chirping made his skin crawl. The sole reason he'd agreed to this appointment was because his corporation's insurance provider had demanded it and threatened media exposure if he declined evaluation after fainting during a business presentation. A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Montgomery," she announced, "your physician is ready for you now." He rose, offering a brief nod, masking the exhaustion that pulled at the edges of his expression. She guided him through a hushed hallway, adorned with platinum plaques and certificates of achievement. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He let it ring. Business could pause for 5 minutes. When he entered the examination room, he heard the sound of a pen tapping rhythmically against a medical chart. "Good afternoon, Mr. Montgomery. I'm Dr. Sullivan. Thank you for your—" Her voice died mid-sentence. Marcus went rigid. The clipboard trembled slightly in her grasp before she steadied it. The entire world seemed to shift, all sound draining away, until nothing remained except the frantic drumming of his pulse in his temples. "Elena," he breathed, his voice raw with disbelief. She blinked rapidly, her professional composure snapping back into position like armor. "It's Dr. Sullivan these days," she corrected smoothly, motioning toward the examination table. "Please take a seat so we can begin your assessment." He complied, moving as though submerged in water. The last time he'd laid eyes on her, she'd been standing outside his building in a downpour, tears streaming down her face, voice fracturing as she'd said goodbye forever. That was 7 years ago. Now she stood before him, self-assured and polished, dressed in an immaculate white coat over charcoal scrubs. Her rich mahogany skin seemed to glow beneath the overhead lighting, and her thick waves were swept back elegantly. Only her eyes betrayed her, deep hazel pools brimming with emotions she couldn't quite conceal. Marcus managed a strained smile. "I certainly wasn't anticipating this encounter." "I doubt either of us were," she replied coolly, reviewing his medical history. "Let's maintain professionalism, shall we?" He nodded, though his thoughts were already spiraling through memories. Late nights in cramped coffee shops, her laughter echoing across university libraries while he sketched out business proposals. The moment he'd told her he couldn't afford distractions, that romantic entanglements would derail his ambitions. He'd believed he was protecting his destiny. Instead, he'd obliterated his happiness. Elena attached a small sensor to his fingertip, carefully avoiding his gaze. "I'll be monitoring your pulse and arterial pressure. You've been experiencing considerable strain." "That's an understatement," he murmured. "Commanding a multi-billion-dollar enterprise tends to create certain pressures." Her lips curved ever so slightly. "I can imagine." The tension was suffocating. Her touch remained clinical, methodical. But each time her fingers grazed his skin, electricity shot through him. His heart rate spiked noticeably on the display. She observed it. "Try to remain calm, Mr. Montgomery," she said softly. "You're causing the equipment to overreact." He laughed low and strained. "Perhaps it's the physician causing the reaction." Her eyes lifted to meet his, sharp and guarded. "This is a medical consultation, Marcus. Don't transform it into something else." Hearing his given name struck him harder than expected. He studied her features, the same face he'd memorized years ago, now refined by experience and something harder. "Distance. You seem content," he said eventually. "Changed, but content." "I am," she responded simply, checking the monitor. "Now inhale deeply for me." He obeyed, though his chest felt constricted. The examination continued in loaded silence, only the rhythmic beeping filling the space between them. Finally, Elena removed the sensor and made several notations. "You've been overextending yourself severely," she stated. "Your stress indicators are elevated, and your blood pressure isn't optimal. I'll need to analyze your lab work before providing a comprehensive diagnosis." "Translation?" he asked. She met his stare directly this time. "Translation reduce your workload, or your system will force you to—" He smirked faintly. "You always possessed a gift for directness." Her expression softened for just an instant before professional detachment returned. "That concludes today's appointment. My staff will arrange your follow-up visit." She turned toward the exit, but he stopped her. "Elena, wait." She paused, her hand resting on the door handle. "7 years," he said quietly, "and I never had the opportunity to say I'm deeply sorry." Her shoulders tensed. "It's ancient history." "Not to me." She didn't respond. Drawing one measured breath, she opened the door and departed, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Marcus remained there long after her absence, the room suddenly feeling too cramped, too sterile, too haunted by regrets. He'd survived corporate battles, public scandals, and professional betrayals, but nothing shook him quite like those 5 minutes with Elena Sullivan. Later that evening, he stood beside the floor-to-ceiling windows of his luxury apartment, staring out at the metropolis that had granted him everything while taking so much more. His reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar, the powerful executive with shadows beneath his eyes, gripping a water glass as though it might anchor him. Her face refused to leave his consciousness. He'd constructed empires, traversed continents, and insulated himself with influence, all to escape the agony of losing her. But now fate had thrust her back into his world, wearing a physician's coat and wielding the power to see through every defense he'd built. His phone buzzed on the counter. He ignored it initially. When he finally glanced at the screen, it wasn't correspondence from an investor or colleague. It was from the Institute. Urgent. Laboratory results available. Please contact Dr. Elena Sullivan immediately. Marcus's pulse accelerated. Urgent. What could that mean? He pressed dial. The line rang once before transferring to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. He was halfway to grabbing his car keys when his phone rang. "Mr. Montgomery," the nurse's voice remained composed but firm. "Dr. Sullivan has reviewed your results. She's requesting you arrive first thing tomorrow morning. She'll discuss everything with you directly." Marcus's throat went dry. "Is it serious?" "I'm afraid she'll need to address that with you personally." The line disconnected. Marcus stood frozen in the silence of his penthouse, heart hammering so violently it ached. He sank into the nearest chair, ice crawling through his veins. For the first time in years, Marcus Montgomery, the man who believed he controlled everything, realized he might have just lost control of the one thing he could never afford to lose: his heart. And the only person capable of saving it was the woman he'd already destroyed. The following morning, rain streaked down the windows of the Manhattan Cardiology Institute, obscuring the city beyond. Marcus arrived earlier than necessary, his customary confidence replaced by apprehension. For someone who'd built a global corporation, he'd never felt so powerless. Elena's assistant escorted him to her private consultation room. The space felt intimate and welcoming. Shelves lined with medical publications, a solitary orchid gracing her desk, and daylight filtering through delicate curtains. It carried the faint scent of jasmine and fresh cotton, so distinctly her that it physically hurt. When she entered, he rose instinctively. She offered no smile. "Mr. Montgomery," she said, placing a folder on her desk, "please be seated." He complied. His palms were damp. She opened the file and spoke evenly. "I've examined your test results. You're not facing immediate danger, but there are concerning indicators. Your stress levels are critically high, and you're exhibiting early manifestations of chronic exhaustion. Insomnia, dehydration, irregular heartbeat. You need rest, proper nutrition, and disconnection from work." Marcus exhaled, tension easing marginally. "So I'm not dying?" "Not yet," she said, raising an eyebrow. "But if you continue this lifestyle, you might as well be—" He chuckled softly. "I suppose you truly did break my heart after all, Doctor." The corner of her mouth lifted, but only momentarily. "I'm your physician now, Marcus. Let's not confuse that with nostalgia. I'm completely serious." Her pen stopped moving against the paper. "Don't do this." He leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees. "You believe I didn't feel anything when I walked away?" Her eyes snapped up, sharp as glass. "You didn't walk away, Marcus. You fled. You decided your corporation, your vision, your pride were all more valuable than what we shared." "I was petrified," he admitted quietly, "of failing, of losing everything before I'd even started. You wanted security. I could barely afford groceries. I thought if I succeeded first, I could return and repair everything." "You can't repair," she interrupted, her voice trembling beneath its steadiness. "What you abandon and destroy." Silence enveloped the room. Rain pattered softly against the glass. Marcus looked down, guilt settling heavy in his chest. "You're absolutely right. I was a fool. I convinced myself I was protecting you, but honestly, I was protecting my ego." Elena's tone softened, though her guard remained elevated. "I nearly abandoned medicine after you left. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't function, but helping others became the only way to heal myself. You taught me what never to surrender." He met her eyes filled with remorse and admiration. "I didn't deserve you then. I'm uncertain if I do now." She sighed, closing his file. "You need to address your stress levels, Marcus. That's my medical recommendation." Before he could respond, a wave of dizziness washed over him. His vision blurred and he gripped the desk's edge. Elena's professional mask dropped instantly. "Marcus!" She rushed to his side, supporting his shoulder. "Breathe slowly and deeply." He obeyed, closing his eyes until the room stabilized. "I'm fine," he muttered. "You're far from fine," she said sharply. "You're completely exhausted." Her hand remained on his arm longer than medically necessary. Neither moved. The pulse beneath his skin beat wildly, not from fear, but from her proximity. When he finally looked up, their faces were mere inches apart. "I suppose I still affect your heart rate," he said quietly. She stepped back, flustered. "You need rest. I'll observe you for several minutes before you leave." He smiled faintly. "You've always cared for me, even when I didn't earn it." She didn't reply, occupying herself with the monitor, but the tremor in her hand revealed her truth. The silence between them grew thick, saturated with unspoken history. Their first kiss beneath a streetlight, midnight study sessions, whispered dreams about their future. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. Why now, Marcus? Why re-enter my life like this? He met her gaze. I didn't orchestrate this, but perhaps fate decided we deserved another opportunity. Her expression flickered, equal parts longing and disbelief. You don't have the right to say that. Perhaps not, but I mean every word. I never stopped loving. Don't, she cut him off, standing abruptly. You're my patient. Nothing more. He nodded slowly, though his eyes conveyed he didn't accept it. After several quiet moments, she cleared her throat. You may leave now. My staff will schedule your next appointment in several days. He rose, adjusting his jacket. I'll be present. And thank you, Doctor. She turned away, attempting to mask the emotion shimmering in her eyes. Simply performing my duties. Marcus hesitated, then reached into his pocket and slid a business card across her desk. If you ever require anything at all, contact me. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Goodbye, Mr. Montgomery. He departed without another word, but as the door clicked shut, Elena pressed a trembling hand against her chest, trying to steady the tempest inside. Later that evening, Marcus found himself before the mirror in his penthouse. He appeared healthier than he felt. The conversation replayed endlessly in his mind. Her voice, her anger, her eyes that still burned with something he couldn't identify. He wasn't finished. Not this time. That night, he called her office. Dinner, he stated simply. As gratitude for preventing my self-destruction. Her response was curt. That's inappropriate, Mr. Montgomery. It's not a romantic dinner, he insisted. It's appreciation. 1 hour, neutral location. You select the venue. There was a pause, then softly. Fine. 1 hour. When she walked into the restaurant, every eye turned. She embodied grace and composure wrapped in midnight blue silk, her waves cascading loosely around her face. Marcus stood as she approached, momentarily breathless. You're late, she said lightly. You still notice, he teased. Dinner began awkwardly. Polite discussions about careers, research, and international travel. Gradually, the tension dissolved. They laughed once, twice, and for a moment it felt as though the world had rewound too before everything collapsed. He was about to confess the sleepless nights, the regret, the truth that he'd never stopped loving her when a voice interrupted. Well, this is quite unexpected. A tall blonde woman materialized beside their table, elegant and self-assured. Camera flashes erupted somewhere behind her, the unmistakable glare of paparazzi. Marcus, she purred, touching his shoulder. You didn't mention we'd have company. Elena froze. The woman turned to her with a flawless smile. I'm Victoria, Marcus's fiancée. The words struck like a physical blow. Elena's breath caught, her entire body going rigid. Fiancé, she whispered. Marcus shot to his feet, panic flooding his features. Victoria, this isn't... But Elena was already standing, voice trembling. You truly haven't changed at all, have you? Elena, please wait. Cameras clicked rapidly. People stared. She grabbed her coat and walked out without another word. By the time Marcus made it outside, she'd vanished, swallowed by the rain-soaked streets of Manhattan. He stood beneath the streetlight, drenched, surrounded by the echo of his own failures, wondering how he could lose her twice in one lifetime. The city refused to sleep, and so did he. Rain hammered against Marcus's penthouse windows, distorting the skyline he once cherished, the one that used to make him feel unstoppable. Now it only magnified his smallness. Headlines exploded across every platform. Billionaire's secret rendezvous causes scandal, and tech mogul's mysterious fiancé sparks controversy. Each time he saw Elena's face in those photographs, walking away from that restaurant, pain etched across her features, it felt like being stabbed repeatedly. He'd contacted her office daily. No response. He'd sent flowers, messages, even a handwritten apology, something he hadn't done in years. Still silence. For someone who could purchase silence, manipulate headlines, and command industries, he couldn't reclaim the one thing he genuinely wanted: her. By the fourth morning, his patience and restraint evaporated. He abandoned a board meeting mid-sentence, disregarding the shocked expressions from his executives. "Clear my schedule," he instructed his assistant. "Everything." Then he grabbed his coat and stepped into the storm. By the time he reached the Manhattan Cardiology Institute, he was completely soaked. Rain plastered his hair to his scalp, streaming down his face like tears of penance. The pristine hospital lobby gleamed around him, white marble surfaces, hushed conversations, the subtle hum of medical equipment. The receptionist blinked up at him, startled. "Mr. Montgomery, sir, you're drenched. May I assist?" "I need to see Dr. Sullivan," he said roughly. "Please." "She's currently in surgery," the woman stammered. "Then I'll wait." He claimed a seat in the waiting area, ignoring the stares. Water pooled at his feet, his soaked shirt clinging to his frame. He looked completely out of place, a billionaire in a suit worth more than most vehicles, sitting like a broken soul in a hospital chair. 2 hours passed. He didn't budge, didn't check his phone, didn't even breathe normally. Each time, footsteps echoed down the corridor, his head jerked up. Until finally she appeared. Elena walked toward the reception desk, her surgical cap tucked into her pocket, her waves slightly damp with humidity. She looked exhausted and stunning. When she spotted him, she froze completely. "Marcus!" He rose instantly. "I need to speak with you." Her eyes narrowed, equal parts shock and irritation. "You can't just appear here uninvited." "I can't lose you again," he said quietly. "Not like this." Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. The rain still dripped from his coat, his clothes molded to his body. But his eyes, those steel-gray eyes she once fell in love with, burned with sincerity. "5 minutes," he pleaded. "That's all I'm requesting." Elena sighed, scanning the hallway to ensure privacy. "Fine. 5 minutes. My office." Her office felt smaller than he'd imagined, cozy, filled with medical texts and framed credentials. There was a lingering scent of coffee and jasmine, familiar in a way that twisted his insides. She gestured toward a chair but remained standing. "Say what you came to say." Marcus stayed on his feet, hands buried in his wet pockets. "That woman, Victoria, she's not my fiancée." Elena released a bitter laugh. "Oh, really?" "Because every publication in Manhattan seems convinced otherwise. She's the daughter of one of my company's original investors," he explained quickly. "Years ago, her father attempted to force a corporate merger. The engagement rumor circulated, and I didn't bother denying it. I didn't care enough then." His voice cracked. "But I should have cared when it started destroying you." Elena's expression wavered, her arms still crossed defensively. "You allowed people to believe a falsehood because it was convenient." He nodded once. "I did. I thought none of it mattered until I witnessed what it cost me." "Marcus, you can't rewrite the past simply because you're remorseful now." "I'm not attempting to rewrite anything," he said softly. "I'm trying to finally speak the truth." Her chest rose and fell as she struggled to maintain composure. "Why now?" "Why come here and do this?" He took a slow step toward her. "Because when I encountered you again, something fundamental shifted inside me. I've spent years constructing an empire, and it's hollow. All of it. You're the only person who ever truly saw me. Before the wealth, before the recognition." She swallowed hard, but her voice remained steady. "You wounded me, Marcus. You abandoned me and left me to gather the fragments. Do you comprehend what that did to me?" "Yes," he whispered, "because it's been destroying me ever since." He ran a hand through his hair, his voice rough with emotion. "My body's been surrendering. I can't sleep. I can't breathe without thinking about you. You once told me that hearts remember what minds forget. She froze, eyes widening. You remember that? Every single word, he said. And I believe mine has been remembering you for 7 years. Her composure fractured just slightly, a tremor in her lips, a flicker in her eyes. You can't just return to my life and expect me to believe you've transformed. You're absolutely right, he said. That's why I didn't come with only words this time. From his coat pocket he extracted a waterproof envelope, placing it gently on her desk. She frowned. What is this? An endowment, he said quietly. A complete cardiac wing here at Manhattan Cardiology. Research laboratories, recovery facilities, scholarships for disadvantaged medical students. It's already authorized, she blinked repeatedly. You're funding an entire hospital wing? Not me, he corrected softly. You. It's going to be named the Sullivan Heart Institute. Elena stared at him, speechless. He continued before she could speak. This isn't about guilt or philanthropy. It's because you rescued my life twice. Once when you treated me, and again when you reminded me who I was. You've always been the reason I wanted to accomplish something meaningful. Tears welled in her eyes, her voice barely audible. Marcus, that's... He took a step closer. It's the only method I know to demonstrate that I'm sincere. Her voice trembled. You make forgiveness sound so simple. It's not, he said softly. But it's worth pursuing. The silence that followed felt thick and fragile. Outside, the rain softened to a gentle drizzle, tapping rhythmically against the glass. Elena turned away, pretending to adjust the orchid on her windowsill, but her shoulders trembled visibly. You have changed, she said finally. You genuinely have. I had to, he said. You don't receive a second opportunity with someone like you unless you earn it. When she turned back, tears glistened on her lashes. She took a hesitant step toward him. And if I can't promise anything immediately, then I'll wait, he said simply. However long it requires. Something in his tone, quiet, resolute, dissolved the last of her defenses. Slowly she reached for his hand. His fingers brushed hers, and in that small, simple contact, 7 years of distance evaporated. I never stopped loving you, she whispered. Marcus's breath caught. Then don't stop now. He pulled her gently into his arms, and this time she didn't resist. Her cheek pressed against his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, the very sound she once believed she'd never hear again. Seems your heart is functioning perfectly, she murmured, smiling through her tears. He laughed softly, pressing his lips to her forehead. It remembers who it beats for. 3 months later, morning sunlight spilled over the polished marble floors of the Sullivan Heart Institute. Journalists and medical staff packed the lobby, the atmosphere electric with applause and camera flashes. A massive ribbon stretched across the glass entrance. The engraved plaque gleamed proudly. The Sullivan Heart Institute, dedicated to healing and hope. Marcus stood beside Elena at the podium, looking healthier now. No dark circles, no anxious energy, just peace. Elena, radiant in a white pantsuit, smiled as she addressed the audience. This institute isn't merely a building, she said, her voice carrying warmth and authority. It's a promise that every heart, regardless of how damaged, deserves a second chance. Marcus's gaze never wavered from her. When the applause thundered, he leaned close and whispered, You've always been the heart of everything, Elena. She turned toward him, her eyes luminous. And you finally learned to listen to yours. As the ribbon fell and confetti exploded into the air, he slipped his hand into hers. You repaired more than my heart, he murmured. You healed it completely. She smiled softly. You simply needed someone to remind you it was still beating. The crowd erupted as he drew her close, pressing a tender kiss to her lips, not from impulse, but conviction. Cameras flashed everywhere, but for once, Marcus Montgomery didn't care who witnessed it. He wasn't the cold, untouchable billionaire anymore. He was a man reborn, anchored by love, humbled by loss, and finally complete again. Outside, the city skyline sparkled beneath the golden sun, the rain now only a distant memory. Elena rested her head against his shoulder, her hand intertwined with his. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we never crossed paths again?" she asked softly. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then my heart never would have learned how to truly live." She laughed quietly. "Always the dramatic one." He chuckled, his tone tender. "Perhaps, but I finally have something worth being dramatic about." Their eyes met, steady, certain, and filled with peace. And as the applause echoed around them, Marcus realized that after all the chaos, the turmoil, and the years of separation, the only sound that truly mattered was this: two hearts beating together in perfect synchrony once again. 6 months later, spring had returned to Manhattan. Soft rain, blooming magnolia trees, and sunlight that spilled like liquid gold over the glass towers. Marcus stood on the rooftop garden of the Sullivan Heart Institute, the same place they'd first unveiled the foundation together. The city shimmered below, but his eyes were fixed on the woman approaching him, Elena. She wore a flowing ivory dress that caught the evening breeze, her waves brushing her shoulders, her smile gentle and knowing. The years between them had dissolved. What remained was everything they had reconstructed: trust, love, and something even deeper. "Why did you ask me to come up here?" she asked, teasing. "You look anxious, Mr. Montgomery." He gave a soft, unsteady laugh. "Perhaps I am." She tilted her head, amused. "That's unusual." He took her hand. "You once said that healing isn't about repairing what's broken. It's about learning to live with what remains." Her eyes softened. "I did say that." Marcus exhaled, his voice quiet but steady. "Well, what remains of me is you." Before she could respond, he lowered himself to one knee. The world around them stilled. The wind, the hum of the city, even the distant sirens all fell silent as he opened the velvet box. Inside, a diamond glowed beneath the sunset, simple, timeless, breathtaking. "Elena Sullivan," he said, his voice trembling just slightly, "you returned my heart to me. You showed me how to love, how to live, how to be more than a man hiding behind accomplishments. I don't want to spend another day without you. Marry me." Her breath caught, her eyes filling with tears. "Marcus." He looked up, smiling nervously. "I mean, if you're still accepting patients with chronic attachment disorders." She laughed through her tears, the sound he'd missed most in the world, and knelt to meet him. "I told you once that some hearts never forget," she whispered, her hands trembling as she cupped his face. "Mine never stopped loving you. Yes, Marcus. Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and when she kissed him, deeply, fully, without hesitation, the city lights flickered to life behind them like the universe itself had given its blessing. 1 year later, the Montgomery estate in upstate New York was alive with music and laughter. Soft string lights wound through maple trees. Guests gathered beneath a canopy of white peonies, their glasses shimmering in the golden afternoon light. Marcus stood at the altar in a tailored charcoal suit, looking every bit the man he had become, not the cold billionaire the world once knew, but a husband waiting for his future. Then she appeared. Elena walked down the aisle, radiant in ivory lace, her bouquet of pale roses trembling slightly in her hands. Every step she took was slow, graceful, and when their eyes met, time folded in on itself. The ceremony was intimate, just family, close friends, and the people whose lives they had touched through the Heart Institute. When she reached him, he whispered, "You're even more beautiful than I imagined." She smiled. Good thing you finally gained some sense." They exchanged vows beneath a canopy of white peonies, promises not of perfection, but of truth, forgiveness, and faith. "I promise to never flee from love again," he said. "And I promise to never stop believing that hearts can heal," she replied. When he kissed her, the crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, confetti rained down, and for once Marcus didn't care how many headlines would follow, because this time the story was genuine. 2 years later, morning light filtered softly through the hospital window. Elena sat on the edge of a hospital bed, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "Breathe," Marcus said, pacing beside her, trying not to panic. She glared playfully. "Marcus, if you tell me to breathe one more time." He raised his hands in surrender, though the corners of his mouth twitched. "I'm just... you're... we're..." She reached out, grabbed his wrist, and squeezed. "We're fine. Now help me get through this last contraction before I reconsider letting you in the delivery room." Hours passed in a blur, nurses moving in and out, monitors beeping, rain pattering softly against the glass. And then, at exactly 4:17 in the morning, the sound of a baby's first cry filled the room. Marcus froze, his throat closed, his vision blurred. The doctor smiled and said, "Congratulations, Dr. Sullivan and Mr. Montgomery." "It's a girl." Elena's head fell back on the pillow, tears streaming down her cheeks as the nurse placed the tiny wriggling bundle in her arms. Marcus approached slowly, as though afraid to breathe too loudly. When he saw the baby's face, warm brown skin, soft curls, tiny fingers curling around his thumb, his heart shattered open all over again. "She's perfect," he whispered. Elena smiled weakly. "She has your eyes." He shook his head. "No, she has yours. The eyes of the woman who saved me twice." He bent down, pressing a kiss to both their foreheads. "Welcome to the world, little one," he murmured. "You have no idea how long we've waited for you." Later that morning, the room was quiet. The chaos faded. The rain had stopped and sunlight glowed against the window pane. Elena slept peacefully, the baby resting against her chest. Marcus sat beside the bed watching them, his entire world bundled into that single frame. When Elena stirred, she found him smiling softly. "What are you thinking?" she asked sleepily. He took her hand, his thumb tracing the new gold band on her finger. "I was just thinking about how every wrong turn, every heartbreak, every storm led us here." She smiled faintly. "You sound like one of my patients." He chuckled quietly. "Maybe I am just permanently admitted." She laughed, shifting slightly as the baby made a small noise. "We still haven't decided on her name." Marcus leaned closer, brushing his knuckles against the baby's tiny hand. "How about Grace?" Elena looked down at the sleeping infant, then back at him. "Grace Montgomery," she whispered, tasting the name. "It's perfect," he smiled. "Because that's what you gave me." "Grace." She reached up, cupping his cheek. "And you gave me home." They stayed that way for a long time, 3 heartbeats in perfect rhythm, a quiet miracle born from pain, forgiveness, and love. Outside, the city hummed awake. The skyline glowed with sunrise, bright, endless, alive. Marcus pressed a final kiss to Elena's forehead and whispered, "Looks like the heart remembers how to start over after all." She smiled, eyes still closed. "No," she whispered back. "It just remembers who it was beating for all along." If you enjoyed this story of second chances and healing love, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who believes in the power of forgiveness. Your support helps us bring you more heartwarming stories. Thank you for watching.